Okay, have you ever noticed this? There's like this secret pattern hiding just under the surface of your favorite movies. It's this hidden code that makes stories like Star Wars, Harry Potter, and The Matrix feel so, I don't know, powerful and weirdly familiar, right? Well, today, we are going to crack that code. Yeah, it's that feeling, that little bit of déjà vu you get when you're watching a brand new movie. But here's the thing. It is not a coincidence. Not at all. From the oldest myths to the biggest blockbusters today, so many of the greatest stories are built on the exact same ancient blueprint. Seriously, come on, let me show you what I mean. So think about Star Wars, right? You've got this restless farm boy stuck on a desert planet who finds out he has some hidden power and, ends up saving the entire galaxy. Or what about Harry Potter, an unloved orphan literally living in a cupboard who suddenly discovers he's a wizard and is totally destined for greatness? And of course, there's the Matrix. You have this bored computer hacker who finds out his entire reality is just a simulation, and guess what? He just might be the guy who saves all of humanity. Okay, so you see the pattern, right? That feeling of familiarity? It's not a coincidence, and it's definitely not lazy writing. What you're seeing is a storytelling blueprint that's literally thousands of years old. And the reason it works so well is that it taps into the very core of what makes us human. So, back in 1949, a brilliant mythologist named Joseph Campbell was studying myths from all over the world, and he made this absolutely stunning discovery. He realized that they were all, basically, telling the same story. He called this universal pattern the monomyth, but you and I probably know it better as the hero's journey. Now, Campbell's original idea was, well, it was pretty academic, pretty dense. But then, fast forward to the 1980s, a Hollywood screenwriter, a guy named Christopher Vogler, took Campbell's work and basically boiled it down into a super practical 12-stage formula. And this version, it became this secret weapon for writers at huge studios like Disney, and it's the engine behind some of the biggest blockbusters you've ever seen. So, what exactly are these 12 stages? You know what? Let's just use a classic example to make it clear. Luke Skywalker. Okay, first up, he's in his ordinary world, just a bored kid on a desert farm. Then, boom, the call to adventure arrives and a message from a droid. He's hesitant, but then he meets his mentor, the wise old Obi-Wan Kenobi, who helps him cross the threshold and leave his old life behind for a galaxy of rebels and empires. Along the way, he faces all these tests, makes allies, and then comes the ordeal, that gut punch moment where he loses his mentor. His final victory, the resurrection, isn't just about blowing up the Death Star, right? It's about him finally learning to trust the Force. And he returns with the Elixir, which in this case is hope for the entire rebellion. See? It maps on there perfectly. Okay, so that's the what of the hero's journey. But the really fascinating question is why? Why does this one structure have such an incredible grip on us? Well, the answer isn't really in mythology anymore. It's in psychology, specifically the work of a guy named Carl Jung. So Jung had this incredible theory. He believed that we're all born with something he called the collective unconscious. Think of it like a shared psychic inheritance, almost like a mental hard drive passed down from all of human history. It's this deep well of shared experiences and symbols that every culture, everywhere, taps into for its myths and its stories. And that's why these tales from totally separate civilizations can feel so eerily similar. They're all drawing water from the same well. They're using the same source code. And Jung also said these stories are filled with what he called archetypes. These are basically universal roles or characters that represent different parts of our own minds. So the hero, that's our conscious self, our ego. The mentor, that's our inner wisdom, that higher self. But the villain, the villain. Jung thought the villain was maybe the most important archetype of them all, the shadow. The shadow, now this is cool, the shadow represents all the parts of ourselves that we push down and deny. Our anger, our jealousy, our fear, all that dark stuff. So the hero's journey, from this perspective, isn't really about beating some bad guy out there. It's a powerful metaphor for what Jung called individuation. That's the messy, difficult process of confronting our own darkness, our own shadow, and integrating it to become a whole person. See, true victory isn't destroying the shadow, it's understanding it. And this right here is where it gets really powerful. Because this blueprint, it doesn't just apply to movies and books. It can be an incredibly powerful map for understanding our own lives. I mean, Joseph Campbell himself absolutely believed this. He argued that the stages of the journey are basically mirrors for the big rites of passage in our own lives. Leaving home, finding a purpose, gaining some wisdom. And what's amazing is that modern psychology actually backs this up, showing that viewing our lives this way can have a really profound impact. Yeah, research actually shows that when we reframe our personal struggles through this lens, it can dramatically improve our sense of well-being. Think about it. A personal crisis is no longer just a tragedy. It's a call to adventure. A huge setback isn't just a failure. It becomes your series of tests. This simple shift in framing, it's a game changer. It literally changes your perspective from being a passive victim of circumstances to being the active hero of your own story. And that fosters some incredible psychological resilience. Okay, but let's be real for a second. For all of its power, the hero's journey isn't perfect. It's not this one-size-fits-all model that explains every story ever. And to really understand it, we have to be honest and look at some of the really valid criticisms that have been raised against it. So critics usually point to two major biases in the model. First, there's the charge that it's ethnocentric, that it risks stripping away the unique cultural details of a story just to force it into this single kind of Western-centric psychological mold. And the second big one is that it's overwhelmingly androcentric, which is a fancy way of saying it's male-centered. I mean, think about it. In the classic Monomyth, women are way too often just the prize to be won or the helpful sidekick, instead of being the hero of their own journey. And it was in direct response to that male-centered bias that a scholar named Maureen Murdoch developed a really fascinating alternative model back in the 90s. And what's important here is that it's not just a gender-swapped version of the same old thing. No, it's a map for a fundamentally different kind of psychological quest. The difference between them is pretty fundamental. The classic hero's journey is often about an external quest. It's linear, and the goal is usually about conquest and achievement. But the heroine's journey is much more internal and cyclical. Its goal isn't to go out and conquer the world, but to heal the self and find a sense of wholeness through connection and balance. Two very different paths. So, what's the big takeaway here? Look, the hero's journey is an unbelievably powerful tool. It's fantastic for understanding stories and even for understanding ourselves. But, and this is a big but, it's essential to remember that it is a map, not the map. There are countless other ways to tell a great story, and more importantly, countless other ways to live a meaningful life. Which, leaves us with one final thought. If our lives really can be understood as stories, and we know there are different blueprints for those stories, then it's worth asking yourself, which journey are you on? Are you on that quest for conquest, the quest for integration, or maybe something else entirely? So what story are you living right now?